Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. For those who haven't met me, I'm Shannon and I'm one of the resident artist members at Good Sport. So our virtual Good Talks is our monthly series of artist talks where emerging artists with connections to London discuss their careers. And we would like to acknowledge funding support from the Ontario Arts Council, which is an agency of the Government of Ontario, and thank you very much to them. And Andre is going to introduce Heather.
Thanks, Shannon. So hi, everybody. We're here today for Good Talks. I forget what number of Good Talk we're on, but we're pretty far into our list. We're excited to have Heather Carey here. So Heather Carey is an 8-year London transplant who's originally from Guelph and attended both Guelph and Uvic, and is a former Good Sport studio artist. She's a previous board member of Forest City Gallery as well, and currently sits on the board of Museum London. She's a painter who considers how our conceptions of space is formed by contradictions of experience, memory, and imagination, which is also syncretism, and is interested in painting's ability to explore this syncretic position. Her most recent work comprises paintings of hybrid institutional environments inspired by the intimate relationship she has with the buildings she takes care of in her cleaning job. She presents transitional spaces, reflections of labor and waste, and the blurring of public and private, indoor and outdoor. So yeah, that's just a little introduction on Heather. I also want to do a quick land acknowledgement on behalf of Good Sport. So Good Sport is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and the Attawandaron peoples in southwestern Ontario. These lands are connected with the London Township and the Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant. Our acknowledgement of this place and its peoples is made with deep gratitude, and Good Sport stands in solidarity with the land and water defenders of Turtle Island, and especially with the Six Nations land defenders located near us, fighting for sovereignty at 1492 Landback Lane. So I'm going to post 2 links in our chat here if you would like to find some more information on how you can support Indigenous people who are nearby and also far. And with that, I will pass it on to Heather. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andre, and thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Good Sport, for having me, and the Arts Council for supporting it. Just one second. I apologize. I have a couple of text slides that are a little fuzzy, but everything else should be okay. So yeah, so I'm a painter, as you know, who is interested in creating hybrid spaces. I'm interested in what is possible within a painting and how painting can be explored and reinvented. What makes looking at a painting different from looking at a photo, time passing, materiality, this buildup of different experiences and sort of layered perceptual cues. I also like to think about how painting relates to vision and perception of the world around us. Again, as like a series of images and as a process over time, and this kind of buildup of memories and experiences. So this is one of my more recent pieces from 2018, acrylic on board. But this, I'm just going to show you this. This is kind of where I started. I wouldn't even really call this my work. It was an assignment where we were supposed to copy a pre-existing painting, or modify it in some way. So I ended up using Ben Reeves' smoke cloud paintings. So he did these pieces where he took the most fleeting or transient aspects in an image and instead made them like the most material part of it and used huge masses of paint to be like raindrops and smoke clouds and whatever. So I used a stock photo of a wedding and made one of my very first pieces that kind of pushed me in the direction I've ended up by interrupting pictorial representation with these blobs, in my case, acting as confetti. Then I did a few of these guys on thrift store paintings. Again, working with like what can be done within a painting to the picture plane. And I ended up making many of these paintings with generic interior spaces being activated by these or interrupted by these brush strokes. In these works, the squiggles like both fit within the space and sit on top of them, flattening the illusion down or playing with illusion. With these earlier works, the generic nature of the spaces being presented was important. I wanted the focus to be on the work as a painted space instead of making it something recognizable that took the viewer away or led to specific places in their mind. So I used mostly stock photos of empty rooms that I found on the internet. And then from here, I started experimenting with brush strokes, mimicking objects within the paintings. And I was playing with to what extent were the two different layers kind of integrated and how much of it was an illusion. So this is a little later. These are all oil. I started out in oil. Yeah. That's from 2009-ish. Again, sorry that the text slides are blurry. This is a term that I find relates to a lot of what I do and how I think. This term that Bachelard, I think, coined, syncretism, which is how we tend to experience the world or spaces within the world as a combination of memory, imagination, and experience. Yeah, so that and collage and hybrid, and to me, it all fits together. So when I moved to BC in 2010, my experience of it as a place was very specific. I arrived just after the Vancouver Olympics, and they had all the like glossy TV ads about Vancouver and whatever. And I also had childhood memories of it as a beautiful utopian place. And I was actually Victoria, not Vancouver, but anyway. And don't get me wrong, it's an amazing environment, but I also found it a little difficult to really feel like it was home. I think tourism as a major driving market, combined with the fact that the cities out there are younger and newer than what I'm used to, lent a sort of artificiality and unattainable awesomeness to everything. So this is one from Victoria. They had a lot of alleys in the city, and when I first got there, I started out as a continuation of what I was doing before, still playing with illusion versus flatness, I guess. And in this one, the verticality of it is emphasized. And this is Arbutus. So thinking about the representing and trying to represent this like idealistic place that I didn't quite feel connected to, led me to first make these guys. So I did all these are inflatable rocks, if you can't tell. And it was a type of material experiment. I basically found rocks outside, and I delineated like each plane of the rock and blew it up 5 times and traced the planes out on cardboard and then cut them out of a vinyl painting. So it was I wanted to make 3D paintings by separating rocks into their different planes of space. And I was thinking about each plane as a painting. So yeah, these were like kind of funny fake representations. They didn't really end up holding air well. and I made about 12 of them, and then I built these. I ended up displaying them on these like canvas structures that mimicked mountains in a way. So this wasn't necessarily successful, but it led me to make these pieces, which ended up being my thesis work in Victoria. So this one is called Oak Bay. And then this is Seattle Public Library. So these are paintings done on clear vinyl shower curtains. And they were done by painting on both the back and the front of several layers of vinyl. So I would put the vinyl up on the wall, and I had to paint the mirror image of what I wanted to do on the back, and then stretch it around the stretcher and paint the right side image on the front until I got to the final layer. And then I only painted the inside so that the surface of the painting is flat plastic, and all the paint is contained inside it, basically. So working in this way taught me to be freer and a bit more like reductive with my style. These paintings are representations of specific places on the West Coast. Their objecthood is emphasized. You can see the visible structure, painting structure, and you can see the different layers of paint. And then also their relationship to the space they're being presented in is evident. So you can see the wall and the shadows cast by the paint. This is called Dockyard, and this is a detail. So you can see how it relates to the space that it's being hung on. So I saw these as being their own little places, but ones that couldn't be fully entered. The viewer sees themselves reflected on the vinyl surface. And that sort of mirrored my experience of the West Coast as a whole. And like, don't get me wrong, I had a great time out there, but I just, so I based a lot of my thinking around the work that I was doing out there on Foucault's idea of a heterotopia, basically a world within a world. And I was relating this to like a real existing place that somehow encapsulates the world, but is its own thing at the same time. So thinking of like condo courtyards or gardens that are closed in and they're not quite attainable, but anyway, so that's kind of what I was thinking about with this series. So from time to time, I dabble in sculptural side projects like the Inflatable Rocks, and try to push the boundaries of what might be painting. So this is an installation called River Forks that was done in, I don't remember what the store was called, but there used to
Fotomezi shoes.
Fotomezi shoes downtown that turned into DNA art space for a while. So this was done like pre-reno, multiple artists were interacting with the space, the pre-renovated space. So the base structure of this piece is canvas mache, like canvas and glue on a wire structure. And then I was able to paint flood lines on it. And then I installed the little stretchers in the shelves as building facades. And yeah, so this is, I chose this because the Forks of the Thames is sort of an iconic downtown thing. And then the colors related to other pieces installed in the space. The orange was because James Kirkpatrick had a mural like further down the orange wall. And then you can see on the shelf next to my piece, Jason McLean had these little found sculptures from Vancouver. Yeah.
Heather,
Yes.
I have a quick question. We have some people in the waiting room, but I want to see if they are people you know before I admit them.
Okay, sure.
Do you know a Julia Ramos or a James Kerr?
I don't know.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So London has many like beautiful, I think, kind of mid-century signs in what used to be our studio neighborhood. When I first moved here, I was in the like Hamilton Road area. And I thought these were such cool, like distinct shapes, which could be reduced to their outlines and still be recognizable. So I did a bunch of these little guys, which this one's named Mike and this one's named Alpha. And I initially wanted to do the whole alphabet and I only ended up doing, I think, 15 or 16, but yeah. So I see these little guys as being like paintings within paintings or signs within signs. That's kind of what I was thinking about. And the color palettes for these guys came from Mistint house paints. They're industrial, they're minimal. I was working with what I could find. So London's, this test city for retail companies. And when I moved here, like shopping seemed to be a predominant like interest or value for Londoners. So that was the first thing that I painted when I moved here were these signs. And then I eventually ended up playing with these and making the compositions a bit, sorry, these ones are blurry, they're a little small, making the compositions a bit more complicated. Keeping the flatness, but adding like different layers of signs or separate compositions or moments within the pieces. So then, taking it a bit further, these pieces are from a show at Art Site in Windsor. So with these pieces, I was still incorporating like hints of billboards or signs, thinking about them as compositions within the landscape, but also I'd started relating my paintings to the relationship I have with the buildings I'm taking care of in my job at the university cleaning. So how much these spaces can feel familiar, how much ownership can be developed through noticing subtle changes that take place in lighting to surfaces. And I'm interested in blurring together the indoor and the outdoor and the public and the private, using like both natural and fluorescent lighting as light sources and including window structures which are open but also somewhat block the viewer from fully entering. So you have some stuff like that it's a window, but it's kind of also a shield. So that was those guys. This is called Frosty Concrete. These are more building-based things. You can see I almost always have like references to the outside. I like to use windows. I like to play around with several like light sources. They're really like hybrid spaces, which nods to like the passage of time and how, as someone who's like connected to the space, I really notice small changes in them. So I'm thinking about sort of parallel themes of desire for the idyllic in landscape paintings and how that desire is also a part of advertising and institutional environments. So in my job as facility staff, we're like mostly invisible workers, but we're like magically maintaining this clean, sterile environment. So I generally make groups or a series of paintings and then install them to fit within certain spaces. So this was at Good Sport in their old place, 24 concrete panels. I had 15 paintings and 9 pieces of plexi that were all the same, roughly the same size. So I saw the plexi as mirroring the windows within the pieces, as well as acting as a wall of windows against the arrangement of paintings, which were also laid out in a grid or a window structure. So I'm bringing the outside in, I'm bouncing these different spaces against one another. And it's because so I had this one wall was the big wall that had all the paintings on it, and then I had 6 pieces of plexi here and then 3 on the facing wall, which I had painted gray. So I found this term and I thought it really related especially to my more recent work dealing with the institutional buildings and as like how I experienced the transient nature of them and the little details. So this psychothemia, a form of psychosis in which loss of separation between personality and the surroundings occurs, in which a human can no longer tell where their body ends and their environment begins. The relationship I have to the spaces in my paintings has become much more intimate in the past few years. And also I feel the same about my relationship to the built environment and my world. So I use the language of painting, common symbols, and perspectival tricks to create a feeling of understanding or intimacy, belonging within a space, but at the same time, it's a time-lapsed, multi-dimensional relationship to the environment and how we perceive it. So these are my most recent works. This one is called Trash by Catalog. So these have all been done in the past year during the pandemic. In pandemic times, we've become acutely aware of how space is used, regulated, incorporated into our lives as an extension of both individuals and social behaviors. I started using references to sacred and traditional paintings, using stand-in figures relating to labor and waste, destruction and decay. And I'm trying to lend importance through humor, I guess, to invisible labor and invisible waste and the destruction that humans impart on the world. So this one, it was an art market in the original painting, and I've turned the figures into garbage bags and dumpsters. And then I have, this one is called Garbage Bag Angels, and that's what you see is what you get. Some little nods to like pandemic signage and kind of abandoned feeling spaces. And then this one is my most recent one, and it's called Ceiling Tile Rafts. So I'm now working in a building where even during the pandemic, we have people who are destroying what should be a safe space to live in. There's a lot of cleaning up ceiling tiles that people have broken. So I took that and used, again, historical references of the right panels, like the raft of the Medusa, and I think the other two I took from Turner paintings. So trying to make them a little bit more sacred or something special. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I'm currently working on a book project using a collection of these reference photos from the buildings at work, which again draw attention to some of the transient elements in our built environments, like temperatures and lighting, things on the surfaces. So I'd like to incorporate some brief text from the building's perspective, specifically thinking about how buildings would consider their relationship to humans or users. So it'll be somewhat of an autobiography from the building's perspective, but I haven't done the text yet. So I'm working on that. And then this is my most current painting, which is almost done. And I'm starting to think more about like what the interaction of objects and walls and floors, of like little changes that happen to the surfaces of the buildings again relating to like labor and the passage of time and our changing relationships with our physical environments. So yeah, so in a nutshell, I like to create these like syncretic environments which use what is possible in painting to draw attention to our perception and use of the space around us. And that's all I have to say. So I'm available for questions now, or if you want me to go back and see anything again.
Amazing.
That would be great too.
Thanks, Heather. I'm going to read a couple questions that we had from the chat that were sent during your talk.
Okay.
And you can go ahead and answer those. Let me just 1 second. I just want to make sure. Autumn wanted to know if you had read Orchid Thief by Susan Orleans.
No, Orchid Thief?
Yeah, I think Autumn might be recommending it.
Okay. Sounds good.
I had a question.
Yeah.
The most recent completed paintings you showed, you said, I think you said something along the lines of the original painting was this. Are you still painting over something on those, or was it just your first kind of go at them?
No, sorry, I shouldn't say the original painting. I should say like one of the references I was using.
Great.
So I was taking the composition from a historical painting and changing things so that it's still the institutional like the terrazzo floors and the concrete walls and the fluorescent lighting that I'm used to, but I was using the composition of sort of bigger canonical paintings.
Oh, nice. How did you choose which ones to reference? Was there a specific reason why you chose?
With this one, honestly, this was mostly about the use of space, but also it's the original painting is about an art market. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it was like how art is valued and then also how like other types of labor might be valued. Yeah.
Awesome, I love that.
Pardon?
I said, I love that. That's awesome. Monica has a question. They said, are you still based in London currently, or where are you located now?
Yeah, I'm in London. Yeah.
Awesome.
And yeah.
If anyone in the audience has any questions, they can put them in the chat, or they can say them out loud if you'd like to use the raise hand function or something like that. Actually, I will allow participants to unmute themselves in this scenario. Awesome. I had another quick one. I noticed that, I mean, if not all, but most of your paintings are split into multiple canvases or multiple whatever surface. Is there a reason why you choose to do that?
That's what I've been doing recently. Like my most recent ones are diptychs and triptychs. Partially practical reasons,
Totally.
because I wanted to make really big paintings and I'm sick of like rolling up and unrolling things. But also I think like there's a history, especially again with like with my most recent ones, nodding to historical paintings, nodding to more like religious kind of altar pieces. There's more of a history of like them being triptychs and like interacting with the wall in that way. And I guess it's more like even flexible, like even with the little squares that I installed at Good Sport, they're all the same size. I can kind of mix them up. I can install them in like any number of ways in different types of spaces. So yeah, those would be the reasons why.
Sure, awesome. Monica put their hand up, I believe.
Hi. I'm just wondering, like, is your studio currently at home or do you have a separate studio? And what are you finding works well for you in your studio? Like, are there any changes that you made during the pandemic that you found help you work and be productive there?
Nothing like pandemic related. Like I'm in a shared studio. I share it with my space. It's a shared space, but we have our own like independent units within the space. So we don't really have to worry about whether or not other people are there. But like if we are, like sometimes I'll wear a mask when I go in to the studio. That's the only kind of like pandemic consideration. I'm not at home. I share a studio space with my husband who is building bikes in there. So that's a bit of a like sometimes we have to rearrange stuff to make enough room for whoever's like using it at the time. But yeah, other than that, yeah, the pandemic to me, like other than making everything like a bit more stressful, I've been working the whole time. I've still been kind of out. Yeah, it's just taking those steps to be safe when we need to. And being like, again, being way more aware of the space around us and where other people are in the space and whatever. But,
awesome.
yeah.
We have a question from Jennifer. So you mentioned that your reference photos will be included in a new book you're creating. Will you also include documentation of some of your paintings in the book?
So no, because it's not, it's kind of a separate project. So it's basically going to be a photo book with lines of text, and the text is going to be, I don't know, like poetic maybe, but minimal, and from the perspective of the building. So I'm the one who's making it, but it's not me technically. It's like the buildings who are speaking through the book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Ruth would like to know, you mentioned using mist tints before for your paintings.
Yeah.
Can you speak a bit more about your current color palette?
Ooh. So the way I've been working the past few years, I'm starting with a few reference photos basically that I'm layering together. Often the color palette comes from the initial like landscape that is the basis of the painting. So I'll draw out the composition, like, or several compositions of space, and then the base will be like 4 different colors that are like a wash, a general, a really like reduced version of a landscape, and then I go from there. It's a lot of looking at what's there and building on it in layers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I had a question actually about your materials, because you mentioned you used to, well, you kind of used to use whatever you had, which I can totally relate. You also have oil. What do you think?
I started out in oils, and then I think after I did the plastic paintings, I started painting more in layers, more so in layers, and acrylic's a lot more like useful for that. So since then, I've basically just been doing acrylics. But
awesome.
Yeah.
I had a question. I know a lot of planning goes into your compositions and your works. Do you find that as you're painting that they change a lot from the initial plan, the finished product, or do you kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I know what it's going to look like when I start them a lot of the time. Like, I have general ideas of like of sources that I'm using and how those are going to work together, but yeah, it's really in between each layer. There's a lot of like looking and thinking about like what it needs next. So yeah, it's always changing, and I don't necessarily know where it's going to end up.
Kind of piggybacking on that question, I'd love to know like what your workflow is like in that case. Just like looking at some of these paintings, I wouldn't even know where to start. And so I'm just curious, like, do you just do one thing and then like take a step back? Do you have to take a break and look at it later? Like, what is it like?
Yeah, I have a full-time job, so I'm not really like in the studio for like hours at a time. I go for like 2-hour sessions. So a lot of it is, and I'll try to, I don't focus on one little area. Usually I'll like work all over. So it'll be like laying down a base, like a general composition of what I'm doing. And then the next day I'm going to work on like the floor, or like, I don't know, specific areas, but I'll be carrying color all over. And like, yeah, I wouldn't say that I like concentrate on like hard on one thing at a time, but it does require like, and sometimes I'll be working on one layer, and then I'll be thinking about it, and I'll even like make a list of like the next 3 or 4 steps that I want to do. So that when I come back in the studio, I'll look at the piece again, and I'll look at my list and be like, is this what I want to do still? Like, does that make sense? Yeah, so.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jennifer had another question. Do you think about graffiti and urban issues when doing your work? Is this inspiring to you at all? I would love to see your paintings work large scale in public spaces and in 3D.
Oh, thank you. That's cool. I have no experience with that, so I don't really like. I love good graffiti, like a good. I think activating public spaces like that is can be really like engaging, and yeah. But I haven't personally done anything like that, and I don't know that what I'm doing right now, I don't know if I would be able to translate it into like that kind of mural work. Maybe like possibly something like a bit more graphic or simplified, but along the same lines. Billboards, yeah. I mean, yeah. Actually, at one time I was thinking about like billboard doing paintings on billboards or paintings, like when I was thinking about signs in that way. But yes, I'm not currently thinking about it, but yeah, it has, I guess, kind of been an influence at times in the past.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Does anyone else in the audience have any more questions? Any other words of wisdom you'd like to pass on to fellow artists watching?
Enjoy the weather while it lasts.
Awesome.
Take care of yourselves.
All that good stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Heather. It was a real pleasure to have you
Thank
speak.
you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. So there will be more good talks happening for anyone who is watching. Another one next month. And so yeah, keep up to date with Heather. Keep up to date with Good Sport. And we'd love to see what else, what all these paintings look like when you release them out into the world. It'd be cool. Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night, everybody.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
This was great, Heather. Thank you. Oh, she's gone. This was great, guys. Thank you.